Parents, what have you caught your babysitter doing on a nanny cam? Story 1. I house/dog sit for friends of my parents. The first time I did it, they mentioned they had a security camera by the front door that was motion activated, and I didn't really think anything of it. They were gone for a few weeks. They come home, their 2 giant huskies were happy, I got paid, and all was well. A couple of weeks later, my mom calls me laughing. My parents had dinner with the friends I dog sit for, and they showed a video to my parents from the front door cam. Apparently all it showed was me sprinting full speed down the hallway, a dog toy in hand, the biggest stupid grin on my face, followed by the 2 huskies running and sliding after me, followed by me, followed by the huskies, over and over again. I sit for them as often as I can. I dog sat and house sat for friends of mine a few years ago. Monty was a gorgeous white German shepherd, and I was working weird hours all through the night. Every time I would get home from work at whatever hour of the day, we would play hide and seek for at least half an hour. He was a beautiful boy, and you just reminded me of that beautiful moment with him, so thank you. Story 2. I watched her outside playing with my dogs. She was dog sitting. Our yellow Labrador and golden retriever puppy started munching the blueberries right now off of our blueberry bushes. They know damn well they're not supposed to get into the blueberry patch. We watched our dog sitter run over to them and try to get them to stop. She then ran inside and ran back out with a bowl. She proceeded to race the dogs for the blueberries. Had to be one of the highlights of our trip. We came home to a bowl of blueberries in the fridge and 2 very guilty puppers. One of the dogs my family had when growing up developed a taste for blackberries. We tried to discourage him from eating them through various means, but nothing was out of reach for him, and he had the ability to tell precisely when they ripened. Even though we had vines tied up off the ground, he'd still get them. If you caught him in the act, you'd see him on his hind legs giving a careful sniff to identify the ripe ones, then delicately pluck each one of them off the vine. God, I miss that blackberry thief. Story 3. My story isn't that interesting, but I have a camera to check in on my rabbit when I'm not there. The biggest surprises were mostly just how almost nobody followed my pet sitting instructions. The one exception, ironically, was my brother, who claimed to hate the rabbit and always wanted to get rid of it. I got an alert one day that my camera had detected movement while my bro was there taking care of him, and I decided to take a peek. I opened the app connected to the camera and saw my bro walk into my room, lay on the floor, and start playing with my rabbit. It just warmed my heart. We have cameras outside of our house. One day, my neighbor told me that he saw my bunnies roaming the streets a few times. I didn't believe him, so I took a look. One time at work, I looked at the cameras and saw the gate slightly open, so I rewound the footage. I go to work super early, so I watched as my wife fed them, then got ready for work. The bunnies peeked through the side of the house and waited to see my wife's car leave. Then they pushed on the gate hard enough for the latch to set free. Then they left one by one. Later, before I got back from work, they would make their way back and close the fucking gate. Smart little fuckers. I never knew the gate latch was so weak, so I fixed that problem. I had a similar situation with my mom. She always claimed she didn't like animals, especially cats, and always said we couldn't have them in the house. One day, I found a kitten with a broken leg, and she made the exception that I could keep him until he was healthy, but only if I promised to keep him in my room separate from the rest of the house. I can't tell you how many times I came home from school to find her snuggling with him in the living room or feeding him treats. She would also go outside and call for him to come in before it got dark. Clearly she cared about him, and obviously I kept him forever. My grandparents did the same thing. I live with them, and since my grandpa was allergic, we had an outside kitty. Yes, I now know this is bad. They always pet her. One morning I saw my cat waiting by the back door, staring inside the house waiting for something. I was watching from my room. My grandma comes out and puts down half a bag of treats. My cat scarfed them all up. It was hilarious. I had to ask that they not give her that many. They were never cat people, but they loved my Eve and she loved them. That's really sweet. I don't think having outside cats is a bad thing, depending on where you live. Cats are meant to live outside, and some of them can't be happy unless they have that freedom. I had 5 cats at once, when I lived in Southern California, and 2 were indoor/outdoor cats. One stayed indoors, only, but 2 of them hated being inside. So I let them have the whole neighborhood and whatever they wanted. They would come home when they wanted food or love. I had them all since they were kittens, not all the same age, and they lived indoors first, but as they got older, wanted different things. They were all healthy, happy, and cared for. Story 4. I dog sit for some neighbors, one of which told me she has a camera in the living room/dining room for her dogs. Do you know those ones that dispense treats? Anyway, I thought it was a strange essential oil diffuser until she told me what it was. I was being paid to play with them for an hour, but she found out that I was actually staying for 2 or 3 hours. When she asked me about it, I think I said something like, I'd want someone to do the same for my dog. Ever since then, she leaves me treats in the kitchen and even got me a Christmas present from the dogs. I'm so confused by this story. There are cameras that dispense treats? What's the point of that? Why did you decide to stay for 3 hours? Why did she start giving you treats? How are all of those facts connected? I.e., what did she see in the camera? Please help. The cameras were so that she could watch her dogs while she was at work to make sure they were okay. I stay a couple of extra hours because I want to make sure the dogs have all their energy out and aren't alone for too long. She started leaving me things like baked cookies and whatnot as a thank you for me doing this, and what she saw on the camera was me staying there for much longer than I was paid to. She probably was checking in on the dogs and saw I was there, then checked an hour later and saw I was still there. Oh man, I would love to find someone like you close to me. I hired a dog sitter who only had to let them out and feed them and act like he cared. One night he didn't even show up and said, "Well, they're fine, I'll get to them tomorrow." I was horrified. I made him go that night at 11 p.m. when he was supposed to be there at 7 p.m. Because my god, they are pug mixes and are hungry and have to pee, and he was furious. He didn't get paid his whole rate because of that. I'm still mad about it. Story 5. I was the kiddo. My mom often tells the story of how she watched me give a big old hug to my babysitter who just broke down out of nowhere after serving me lunch. Turns out her dad had died a month back and it just was not a good day for her. I still remember you, Miss Yancey. I hope you're doing just fine now. Man, I had a babysitter with a similar situation in ways that I realized years later was probably helping her out unknowingly. Mom had died of ALS, Dad ended up leaving his job and was a wreck, and then, months after, some sort of sexual assault happened with the principal. I always thought she was just a weirdo. Took until I was older to realize all those things and how playing Legos with little me was probably the most relieving part of her day and why she'd come in crying and be laughing and having fun after a couple of hours. She's doing great now, and Dad too, but man, do I feel awful little me didn't realize how much she was going through back then. Not that I could have done much to comfort her at 5 years old. I'm sure my naivety was enough to distract her from her own life. Story 6. Not me, but my aunt's friend set up a nanny cam because she noticed that every time she changed her child's diaper, the child would start crying a lot more than usual. Turns out, when they watched the nanny change her diaper, she would use Clorox wipes if they were nearby instead of grabbing the baby wipes. Story 7. This isn't a bad one. My parents caught the babysitter carrying our 60-pound golden retriever like he was a baby. I caught the plumber letting my cat sit on his shoulder. I warned him I have overly friendly cats and dogs, and if he wants he can say hi to the dogs in the gated living room. He let them out to potty and put them back. Saw the biscuit tin and gave them all biscuits. He came back again, my washer flooded, and asked if he could say hi to my dog Coco and my cat Coffee. My Cocker Spaniel loves this. He'll come up to you and stand on his hind legs when he wants to be picked up. Scoop him up and he'll hook his hind legs on your belt, and pit one foreleg over each shoulder and just hang out. You don't even really need to hold on. Just help with balance a little bit. Story 8. A friend caught his nanny hitting their kid for interrupting that day's binge of the TV show Friends. So no one told you she was hitting you in the face. Your head's a mess, you're stressed. You gon' be DOA. It's like she stuck you with a needle in the ear. You know she gonna keep doing this all day, all week. Fuck me, maybe all year. But you'll be dead soon, babe, when your blood stops to pour. You'll be dead soon, babe, when you're lying on the floor. You'll be dead soon, babe. And she'll be dead too. My nanny used to smack me when I was about 4 or 5. I remember her cooking was disgusting, and one time she made this stew that looked awful and forced me to eat it, so I threw up all over it. She hit me. She was also really rough when she bathed me. Eventually my brother, who's 2 years older, told my mom. Story 9. Friends of ours don't have kids but have dogs. They were going out of town and told the dog sitter about all of the cameras, including the one that is outside but sometimes picks up reflections and will actively notify them of motion. The dog sitter seemed to get it, but she forgot to convey that to her boyfriend, who came out and walked around naked quite a bit. I feel like that's okay. My son recently called me and asked for my advice about her new dog sitter. She was trying her out for a short vacation, but has many upcoming longer trips. She saw that the sitter had a partner over and that they had some gin and tonics. She asked me what I thought about the empty bottle of gin in her recycling. She said that she felt like the lady did a wonderful job caring for the dogs. One of her dogs is insane, so it takes a lot to watch him. But she trusted her with him. So it's okay that she had her boyfriend over, and they had some gin and tonics, as long as she's responsible and loving with the dogs. Story 10. I got a nanny cam to keep an eye out for my elderly grandfather, especially when the home aides were there. My grandfather started asking for lots of cash and couldn't remember what was happening to it. A brooch that my aunt was supposed to get disappeared, and then I heard reports of my grandfather being inappropriate with some of the home health aides. He was busted squirreling away his medication that he was supposed to be taking in his chair, giving money to an aide and harassing another aide. Sounds like dementia or Alzheimer's. Because of the way it affects the brain, it's very common for people to start behaving very inappropriately, especially in terms of crude language and inhibitions. It's one of those situations that's just got no good answer. It's stressful for caregivers, but at the same time, you just can't assign any kind of moral culpability to someone who's literally no longer in control of their faculties or actions anymore. For about a year before my grandmother passed, she lived in the dementia wing of the assisted living home that they had moved to about 5 years prior. I felt bad that I hated being there, partially because it hurt to see her in that state, not knowing who I was, who her son's wife of 40 years was, but still trying to be a good host to us. The other reason was all the other patients in the wing. She was in great shape compared to most of them. Someone was always screaming. They were just so confused. One guy was always screaming for help. It was very unsettling the first time, just non-stop pleas for help. I must have looked worried because one of the nurses assured me it was normal. The only time he stopped screaming for help was when he started screaming, "I want to fuck you," at someone. It hurt seeing her lose touch so quickly. In less than a year, she went from quick-witted with great jokes and burns to only having a few minutes a day where she was in touch with reality. She did not last long after that. I'd heard how tough it was to have a loved one with dementia, but actually experiencing it, I was not as prepared as I thought I was. Thank you to the caregivers for making their lives better. My grandfather with Parkinson's used to shakily molest me when I was 5 to 8 years old. Then he died. I once remember him screaming, "Get that dog off the table!" in a jug of milk. He was clearly not in his right mind, but it still altered the course of my life and left me very confused as to whether I have a right to be angry with him. You can still be angry at him for how he hurt you, but still be understanding now that you are older and can understand it. Don't take that hurt away. I never left my toddler son alone with my grandfather because I was worried about my grandfather being inappropriate in some way with him. Even with me there, he would try to verbally abuse my son and I would put a stop to it real quick. I told my family to not leave the little ones with Grandpa because he doesn't know how to behave like a grandfather to them. I had a customer who came in once a week for a shave. I'm a barber. He had dementia. His wife drove him and would drop him off and go shopping while he was here. One day he told me that the woman who drove him here every week wasn't his wife. She was using him for his money, and she and some guy had moved into his house and they were stealing from him. He wanted me to call the police to help him, which I probably would have done except for one thing. One of the things he said they stole from him was his gold watch, which he was currently wearing. So instead of calling the police, I called my ex-wife, who was a social worker and worked in child and adult protective services. I told her about my client and mentioned his dementia and what he had said. She told me that it's very common for people with dementia to say those types of things. She recommended that I talk with his wife, but to also look for signs to see if he was being abused, because sometimes they were telling the truth. I didn't see any such signs. When I spoke with his wife, it turned out she was really his wife. The guy living with them was a hospice nurse who was a friend of her family who volunteered to help care for him and help her with the upkeep of the house. The stolen watch thing was her taking his watch off at night when he went to bed so that he wouldn't injure himself with it. She thanked me for not overreacting because just the previous day he'd gotten out of the car while she was running a quick errand at the store. He went into a jewelry store that was next door, told them a similar story, and they had actually called the police. So she had to go through all that. Poor thing. She had the patience for the job though, and it was obvious she cared for him very much. It's been 3 years since that happened. He passed away about a year ago. Story 11. A friend caught her rummaging through her closet and stealing a blouse. She confronted her about it when she returned home, and the woman played innocent. She was wearing the fucking blouse. Similar situation, I managed a cleaning company and one of the customers called very upset. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong because she is a longtime customer and we didn't want to lose the business. At first, she didn't want to say anything because she was uncomfortable, so I knew it must be bad. Eventually, she lets me know that she saw on camera one of the ladies in her closet trying on her shoes while she was in the house with them. She lives in a wealthy area, so all of her shoes are designer, and some are custom fit, and whatever else. She even sent me a copy. I watch it, and sure enough, it's our employee trying on shoes like there's a clearance. She must have tried on like 10 different pairs. She got away with it at the time by leaving the vacuum running, so it sounded like that was what was going on. At the end of the day, when she comes back to the office, I pull her aside to talk about it. The whole time she is denying that she did that. So I said, fuck it, let's show her the video. We're watching it, and it's very obviously her, and she says, that's not me. Story 12. My family bought one to see our dogs when we leave on vacation twice a year. It's one where they can hear us, and we'd thought it'd be great. We hardly used it. We also asked our maid to sit for us while we were out. Once, when we looked at the feed, we saw the dog sitter there a solid 30 minutes early, just petting the dogs and playing with them. She's since retired from working, but was the sweetest old lady and we love her. Another time, my dad left a wad of cash on top of the washing machine, about $600, and she put a rubber band around it with a note saying he misplaced it. Stories like this make me so happy. I was a nanny for a family for over 10 years. I moved 8 hours away, but sometimes I drive up to stay with them if they need me for a weekend. I miss the kids so much. I also babysat/house cleaned all through high school and college. I pride myself on never stealing a thing and never having laid a hand on a child. I'd rather maintain a great relationship and have a guaranteed client base for years to come instead of a $20 object to pawn. Most they'd see me do on a nanny cam was picking my nose. You're awesome. Good to know that there are people out there who babysit and actually enjoy it. Hats off to you, I could never babysit. But I have a dog sitter and loved every minute of it. Sure, the money is cool, but spending time with dogs is even cooler. I'm the oldest of 5, so babysitting is in my blood. I love being paid to kiss boo-boos, paint nails, lay on the floor and color, go on walks outside, and absolutely no TV time under 2 years old. We're having way too much fun to watch TV at any age, actually. Some people don't like to roll around on the floor with kids, like my stepmom, and that's okay. My stepmom always asks why I don't have kids of my own yet. I'm 27, but I get my baby fix every other weekend, and I'm happy to go home to my pets, child-free, until the next babysitting job. I also pet sit, if you're in my area. I did the same with my cat. I had 2 different pet sitters. The first came more often than I asked, and looked like they really loved the cat, and spent time playing with her and cuddling. It was my neighbors, and I didn't pay them, but obviously got them nice gifts as a thank you after. The other one was paid for 30 minutes and spent maybe 5 in the house. Also, I specifically left written instructions to change the litter a maximum of every 5 days, and they changed it twice in 15 days. Ugh. Story 13. I caught her making pillow forts that are heavily resistant to the monsters that may or may not come out during heavy thunderstorms with my kiddo. 20 minutes after bedtime. Needless to say, she was dealt with appropriately. Story 14. My uncle told me this once when a babysitter was holding his daughter, my older cousin, when she was a baby. The baby was playing with her toys, and she somehow swallowed a small piece of something, and the babysitter performed the Heimlich, but for babies. There's a version of that for babies. I don't know where I found it though. She saved my cousin, and her family was thankful. They have no idea where the babysitter is now, but right now she's supposed to be around her late 40s. I had to do this for my friend's son. She and I were hanging out and all of a sudden we heard this choking noise. She was trying to reach down his throat to get what turned out to be a handful of change and was screaming that she couldn't reach it. I grabbed him and managed to save him. The weird thing is, I watched him sometimes for her and I had the thought a week prior to the incident that I should learn the baby Heimlich maneuver just in case. So I looked it up online, thank God, because he was turning blue before the change popped out. That shit is terrifying. Worst noise I've heard in my life. They teach this at any CPR course. I've been certified for 20 plus years due to various jobs revolving around working at a summer camp, then as a teacher, and now because I do physical therapy. I retook a course for my 2-year certification recently and they still teach infant CPR and abdominal thrust, aka Heimlich maneuver, but you don't technically perform abdominal thrusts on infant children, but rather do like others have mentioned, which is grab a baby and turn them over so you're holding them chest down in your hand, and use your other palm to hit their back fairly gently until it pops out. Children that young have such a narrow airway, and anything pretty much pops out. They no longer call it a Heimlich maneuver to avoid payment to said Mr. Heimlich, who is probably not alive. Hence abdominal thrusts. This wound the American Heart Association. Story 15. I've been a pretty regular weekend nanny for an amazing family for 4 years now. They've cycled through a couple of different weekday nannies since I've been with them. There is only one monitor and it's in the little dude's room. Once the mom showed me on camera why they let one go. The little dude said, "Mommy said I don't have to do that," and the nanny snapped back, "Well, it doesn't matter. Mommy is a bitch," and then dragged the kid out of the room by his shirt. Super fired. That right there is why I'm super sketched out with babysitters and daycares with my kid. Super grateful my parents help me with my daughter while I go to work and stuff. If I ever found out something like that happened, I don't know what I'd do, lol. Almost no doubt in my mind I'd end up in jail for a very long time. One of my coworkers had a babysitter who shook his baby so hard that he suffered brain trauma. Still has issues with seizures to this day. He was a totally healthy baby and this lady ruined his life quite literally. I feel so bad for my coworker. I don't know what I'd do if I ever saw that lady in person. She'll be out of jail in a few years or so. Jesus Christ, that is absolutely trash. Someone ought to shake her until she gets brain trauma. Prison is a really shitty place and nothing good comes from it, but that's way too good for people like that. How much time did she get altogether anyway? Probably like 6 years with opportunities to get out sooner. If the parents aren't ones to do anything themselves, you ought to post pictures of her around town once she gets out, just so people are aware, because I'm sure she'll try to get right back into babysitting because it'll be her only option, since the majority of parents aren't going to do a background check. Story 16. We have a security camera in my bedroom for my Rome bunny, so we can keep an eye on her whilst at work, if we go on holiday, etc. Well, my dad is 50, and is a big bloke who acts like he doesn't like pets. Came over to visit one day while I was out. He went into my room and crouched down calling the bunny. He spent an hour trying to pet the rabbit and kept repeating in a soft voice, "I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to pet you and see how fluffy you are." He just about shit himself when I spoke through the security camera to tell him, "She's very fluffy." I have a camera for my bunnies, one male and one female too. The first day we got the second bunny, they were separated by a grill. At work, I wanted to show off to my coworkers during the morning break, and what do I see? The male had escaped and was in the female enclosure. I saw the female going after him and biting him. Today, he still has 2 scars on his ear from the bites. I had to call my girlfriend and tell her to go home during lunch and separate them again. The footage of her trying to separate them is still one of the funniest things I have ever seen. She was scared by them at the time, and you can hear her screaming, "No, don't do that! Stop it! No!" while the male is vigorously humping the female. At some point, after multiple attempts, she managed to separate them. My mom has MS and dementia, problems stemming from that, and my old man has a camera so we can check in on her from work. She always forgets though and is constantly freaked out when we interact through it. She has issues remembering me when I'm there visiting in person, but always knows my voice on camera. It breaks my heart, but I also love hearing how excited she is to talk to me about it. Story 17. This isn't something that I caught a babysitter doing, but I remember that I once saw on TV the case of a parent who went with her baby to the doctor because she cried a lot for apparently no reason. The doctor told them that she looked really stressed and asked them if they were doing something that could make her act like that. They didn't. Then the doctor and the parents noticed some really tiny dots on the girl's belly, and they had no idea where they came from. The babysitter told them that she had no idea, but they didn't believe her and secretly put cameras to spy on what she was doing. Turns out that she was crazy, and she was stabbing the baby with a needle from time to time and doing things like shaking her cradle incredibly hard to torment her. Of course, they called the police, confronted her, and she got arrested. Have a story in the same sad vein. A long time ago, a family friend had a full-time babysitter. After some time, the kid would not sleep and would have extreme fits right before bedtime. It was really bad. The parents couldn't figure out why he was so inconsolable, but decided to get a nanny cam. Through the cam, they discovered that whenever the kid didn't fall asleep right away, or would just be fussy during nap time or sleep time, the nanny would beat the kid to make him sleep. It was the early 2000s, so the nanny cams were a novelty at the time, and I remember the family got fined for having audio because we lived in a two-party consent state for audio. But damn, I cannot imagine how a parent can control themselves in a situation like this. Story 18. Wish I had a nanny cam. My stepsister was watching my brother with disabilities for me. She would dump out the contents of his capsules and use them later. Didn't find out about it until he started having seizures constantly and ended up in the hospital for the second time. She didn't see the harm because she was taking just a little. He not only has seizure meds, but benzos to stop the escalation of a seizure and sleep pills. She was/is desperately trying to escape her own reality in any way possible. 15 plus years later, she's been in and out of multiple rehabs and stole from her own nieces and nephews' meds. She's a mess, and honestly, I am not sure she'll ever own her issues. I don't trust her further than I can throw her, but pity her self-serving mentality, and hope one day she can find the strength to crawl out of her mentally ill hole. Story 19. I travel to the US for work, and am fortunate enough to be able to bring my 2 beagles with me. They have never been away from my side longer than the time I've been at work. They are 10 and 13. I have a camera that I use to check in on them sometimes, mostly because my larger beagle is quite the ingenious guy, opening doors, scooting chairs over places so he can jump up onto the counters, etc., etc. Last year I was in Oregon and had to go home to Michigan for an emergency. I do not fly with them, I will only drive. So I was in a pickle and reluctantly hired someone off of Rover who was willing to come stay over at my hotel room for 3 days. She was great, kept texting me about the dogs and said things like, tossing them a ball right now, so I would check in via cam when I thought it was appropriate. This woman was amazing. Not only was she playing with them enough to make them exhausted, but she was even teaching them new tricks, making them use their brains to solve puzzles, and even got my 42-pound beagle to get up on her back so that she could do push-ups. She was an avid CrossFitter. I was extremely happy. Story 20. I was the child and there weren't any nanny cams, but my parents had left a small bucket of toys and things to keep me busy, and they hired a babysitter to watch me while they both had to take overtime at work, and knew they would be gone most of the day. The babysitter moved that bucket of toys to another room, put me in a crib and proceeded to go off and read or something and left me there for hours with nothing to do, only coming back to check on me or feed me. My parents came back to me just sadly sitting in my crib. I never had a babysitter, but this story reminds me of when I was very young and in school. When we had lunch break, the teacher would leave the classroom and a lunch lady would come in to keep an eye on us for the duration of the break. She would not allow us to do anything other than eat our lunches. We were not allowed to talk, go to the toilet, get out of our seats, or so much as sneeze without her snapping at us. I remember hating her so much and dreading lunchtimes. Why would you get a job with children if you dislike them so much that you force them to sit still and not have any interaction whatsoever? Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.